Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, everyone from Islamabad. I am Faraz Naqvi, the head of Iran program at Institute of Regional Studies. On the behalf of the president of Institute, Ambassador Johar Salim, my colleagues, I welcome all of you for this online event. As you all know that since October 2023, Middle East has entered a new round or a new phase of conflict that is pretty much persistent till up to now. And we have seen through these trends that if there is one state that is to be pointed out that has exploited these conflicts into its favor, that is Israel. We have seen that by exploiting these conflicts, Israel has ensured its footprints not only in its own territory but also beyond that. We have seen the dire situation of Gaza. It is 90% destroyed. The people have been displaced. We have also seen the attacks of Israel or the air strikes of Israel in southern Lebanon. And we have also seen that Israel has been able to expand its territorial expansion beyond Golan Heights into the mainland Syrian territory, specifically the southern arena. And through all this, we have seen the barbaric measures, we have seen the killing of civilians, and there is no total disregard of Israel with vis-a-vis human rights and all that. Amongst all this situation, there are two major Middle Eastern states that have the capability to counter Israel one way or the other, and they have a huge understanding and huge standing in the Muslim world in general as well. The first one is obviously Turkey, and the second one is Iran. So, as we all know that before December 2024, it was Iran who was spearheading the role of influencer in the Syrian territory. But after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, we have seen that Turkey has taken the lead by forming alliances and partnership with the new Syrian administration. To discuss all that, we are joined by two very eminent speakers all the way from Turkey who would be speaking on the Turkish perspective as well as the Iranian perspective. But before introducing our eminent speakers, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Johar Salim, President, Institute of Regional Studies, for his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thanks. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to addressing you for this very important webinar on a topic of great interest. Well, the topic is basically the Israeli attacks in Syria, Iran's policy, and Turkey's response. What we've seen is that since the fall of Bashar al-Assad in December 2024, Israel has launched hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, targeting missile stockpiles, Iranian infrastructure, and Hezbollah links. The collapse of the Assad regime has significantly weakened Iran's influence in Syria, disrupting its land corridor to Hezbollah in Lebanon and undermining its regional called the axis of resistance. The new Syrian administration is influenced by HTS, has splinter factions that is increasingly aligned with Turkey, as per many analysts, and thus sidelines the Iranian-backed position. Like other countries, Turkey has also been critical of Israel's incursions dramatically. It has, of course, avoided direct confrontation. Turkey is one of those countries that is the Muslim world that has enjoyed good relations with Israel for many decades, although now there are certain irritants in the relation because of the situation in Gaza, because of the Israel's seizure of the 1974 demilitarized buffer zone in the Golan Heights has also drawn criticism from the UN and from Ankara as well, muted criticism. Um, as per some analysts, strategic benefits, very pressure on Iranian proxies. Now, high-level Turkish officials, including intelligence chief Ibrahim Kalin, has met with Syrian opposition leaders to discuss border security and post-Assad stabilization, directly influencing the response to Israeli actions. The Israeli air campaign and Turkish ascendancy signals a major regional realignment that sidelines Tehran in favor of Ankara. While Turkish Islamist parties have expressed outrage over Israeli actions, the Erdogan government has prioritized pragmatic engagement in view of the long-standing relation. And has emphasized on post-war reconstruction partnership. Iran's strategy, on the other hand, now appears to be focused on maintaining low-profile ties with residual militias and leveraging diplomatic channels rather than military action. So this is the situation, and we hope that speakers today be able to add a great deal of value to the topic. They're very keen insight. Please, all other participants webinar keen to hear them out, and I am confident that provide us valuable insight in terms of what is happening there, region, parameters. Thank you all for being present virtually, and I look for the interaction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your introductory remarks. Now we would move on to our main session by introducing our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Hassan Unal. Professor Dr. Hassan Unal graduated from the History Department of Istanbul University in 1981 and completed his doctorate at the University of Manchester in England from 1986 till 1993. Upon his return to Turkey, Unal started working in the Department of International Relations at Bilkent University in Ankara until 2008, when he transferred to the Department of International Relations at Ghazi University in Ankara. Professor Unal, who worked for a total of 10 years at Ghazi and then Altim University, was then transferred to the Department of Political Science and International Relations at Maltepe University in Istanbul in 2018, where he continues to work. Professor Dr. Hassan Unail is fluent in English and also speaks French and Greek at a level that will allow him to conduct his academic studies. We are pretty much honored to have you, Dr. Hassan Unail, and I would like to address the inquiry of question towards you, that how do you foresee this Iranian response in the wake of Israeli strikes in Syria? We all know that the current Iranian government is not pretty much happy or not in talking or working relations with the current Syrian administration. So obviously, the weakening of Syrian administration is believed to strengthen Iranian footprints in the Syria. So how do you see and predict and analyze the entire situation vis-a-vis Turkiye Iranian competition, Israeli aggression, and domestic Syrian stability or instability?
Thank you very much, Mr. Naqvi, and thank you also very much for inviting me to this very important webinar on regional politics involving Turkey, Syria, and the Middle East on a large scale. And what I would like to start off by saying what I would like to start off basically is I think the contradictions in Turkish foreign policy. There has been a lot of contradictions in Turkish foreign policy over the last decade and a half, particularly regarding Syria and the Middle East. For instance, today you've asked two important questions. One is related to what Iran has been doing in Syria and the Turkish position regarding Iran's actions, policies, and also Iran's purported intents from the Turkish perspective. But at the same time, the Israeli aggression, as you put it, in Syria in various ways, something that has been going on for nearly 10 years or so. And then how Turkey sees all that. Now, I think the first point I'd like to make was that I think when Turkey basically threw its lot, into the Syrian conflict in 2011, I think it was a major mistake. It was a major mistake to take part in the conflict on the side of the United States and, by implication, Israel and the West did not serve any Turkish purpose at all, did not serve any Turkish interest, because the Syrian government then was extremely friendly with Ankara. True, Turkish-Syrian relations had been strained for several decades since the Syrian independence and all that, because all the Syrian governments were obsessed with something or the other regarding Turkey, and then they did not necessarily embark on a road for a rapprochement with Turkey, if you like. But from 1998 onwards, Turkey-Syria relations improved to a degree that by 2011, Ankara-Damascus relations were almost as good as Turkey-Azerbaijan relations today. So you can imagine how friendly and how brotherly it was. So no sensible government or country would ever attempt at destroying a bilateral relationship which had been built through enormous efforts and which had been basically put on, which had been built on a solid, rock solid ground since 1998. So basically, it was a major mistake to take part in the Syrian conflict, though indirectly on the part of the United States and indirectly Israel and the West. So I think the problem started with that. And since then, there has been no Turkish approach to the crisis which serves Turkey's national interests. And I'm afraid it is still something of the same sort today, as we witness growing Turkish-Israeli tension over Syria. Now, the first point I'd like to make is that during the conflict in Syria, Turkey and Iran basically fell directly in the different fronts, if you like, with Iran supporting to bolster up the regime, the Ba'ath regime headed by Bashar al-Assad in Syria, whereas Turkey tried to undermine that government, in every way it could. And Turkey was certainly instrumental in bringing down the Assad regime. Had Turkey not got involved in the Syria dirty war, and if it had not basically um, uh, given, if it had, for instance, closed up its, how shall I say, border altogether, it would have, the Syria war wouldn't have got that extensive as it had in the years ahead. Indeed, for instance, what you have is the first tension between Turkey and Iran over Syria, which, as I said, did not necessarily serve any clear Turkish foreign policy interest at all. Now, the second point is that now we have the Assad regime out, okay? And now Turkey, Iran, there is a big question mark on what is going to happen to the bilateral relations between Turkey and Iran. Now, with Trump on his high horse, with making enormous demands of an independent country regarding regarding purportedly the making of nuclear weapons and all that by Iran and all that. So what you have is a situation in which there may be some sort of military action to be taken by the Trump administration in order to advance Israeli agenda in the Middle East. So if you look at what happened over the last 30, 40 years or so, you have all the anti-Israeli governments being overthrown by the United States and its allies, with the usual oft reiterated claim that they were all autocratic and totalitarian dictatorial regimes. But if you are going to basically start democratizing the Middle East, you would certainly start with some other countries whose names there is no need to mention. All of us would basically directly point at them. But turning back to the question, now you have rising Turkish Israeli tension over Syria on the one hand. You have suspicion and perhaps even tension underneath between Ankara and Tehran about what's going to happen. Now, the contradiction is clear, for instance, from the Turkish point of view. If you are pursuing an anti-Israeli policy, which I wouldn't think it would be in Turkey's national interest, because Turkey doesn't have any clear-cut dispute with Israel regarding any piece of territory, maritime dispute or islands or blah, blah. So basically, there is nothing that should bring Turkey and Israel into any conflict, other than the humanitarian questions like the Israeli genocide in Gaza. Okay, you should be critical of that, and Turkish government is more critical of Israel in that than any other Muslim country in the region. But would you go to war with a country over something, over a humanitarian issue which does not necessarily involve any Turkish national interest? okay? While all the Arab states seem to be acting with enormous restraint in their approach to what's happening, each and every one of them coming up with excuses of this sort and the other. Okay, Turkey, for instance, could actually have a serious word with Israel about and the United States about the US-Israeli policy of carving out a Kurdish state in the Middle East that would be more directly related to Turkey's national interest and Turkey's national security. But to pick up a fight with Israel over Syria because Israel has been committing a genocide in Gaza and because Israel has been bombing this and the other places in Syria. I could have told the Turkish government right from the beginning that if you undermine the Assad regime and then if you basically overthrow it, then what you are going to face up to in the end is going to be something like this. You would certainly be confronted, you would certainly find yourself in a mess in which you would give Israel a free hand in bombing places and doing this and the other. This was something totally expected. There is nothing unexpected about what Israel is being doing. Indeed, I'm a vociferous critic of Turkey's handling of the Syria crisis, and then I'm on record saying on more than on maybe a million occasions that what Turkey basically has done in Syria is a major gift to Israel. But at the same time, you have a Turkish government which is extremely anti-Israeli, outwardly at least. Okay, this is outlandish at the same time. And then, if you are so anti-Israeli, then why are you quite anti-Iran at the same time? This is also an inexplicable situation. So you are anti-Iranian, yeah, or at least you are. Excuse me. So you are anti-Israeli, and then you have an profusely anti-Israeli regime that is Iran, and you are also against Iran in many ways. So these things don't combine actually, or they don't add up to, anything. And therefore, there are lots of contradictions in Turkey's foreign policy. Now, the political Islamists backing the incumbent government seem to be full of anti-Iranian, anti-Hezbollah, Houthis, and anti-Assad feelings. Sometimes one has the feeling that we are almost back into the Middle Ages, where sectarian differences basically mean much to people. But in terms of modern international relations, excuse me, but in terms of modern international relations of the 20th century, 21st century, these things don't add up, as I say. Now, regarding Turkey and Iran, what I would say, you've got the political Islamists who are certainly buying this anti-Iran agenda, of which I'm quite, I'm not only critical, but also, how shall I say, quite concerned about, because if the United States and in Israel were to go on carving out a Kurdistan of the Middle East, then Turkey and Iran would come out as prospective allies, opposing any such demarcation of borders and what have you. So Turkey should be on the other side, or at least should negotiate with the United States and also Israel some sort of a new policy. Should negotiate in order to bring down the tension with Israel over Syria, although it could remain critical of Israel in its handling of the Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere. And this is what Turkey used to do in the past. For instance, Turkey used to support the Arabs' legitimate rights, both the Palestinians as well as the Arab states, because their Arab states' territories had come under Israeli occupation. And Turkey used to support them politically and diplomatically at every platform, while at the same time, it would do it without turning Israel into an enemy of Turkey. So there seems that the problem these days is that Turkey, when it comes to its approach to the Middle East in general, it loses the nuances. Foreign policy is basically should be based on nuances, and diplomacy should be even more fine-tuned in in the art of nuances and what have you. Although, for instance, Turkish foreign policy towards Ukraine war in particular, has been much more nuanced, and the Turkish government, should be how shall I say, congratulated in coming up with a policy on the basis of all these nuances. And I used to call Turkey in my articles as a juggler, although a member of NATO, basically cultivating best possible ties to Moscow, and at the same time not losing touch with Ukraine, and therefore keeping the lines of communications to both Kiev and Moscow and all that. And although occasionally Ankara seems to get astray of that balancing act, but overall, it has been basically a master of all these nuances. But when it comes to policies regarding the Middle East, we don't have that. I think much of the problem basically stems from that. I think I could stop at that, and then during the Q&A, I would actually elaborate on some of the points that I've touched upon. Thank you for the opportunity again, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hassan. So, in brief, basically, you have pointed out the contradictions in Turkish foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East. You have mentioned that it was sort of an error or a mistake on the behalf of Turkish government back in 2011 when it joined the forces against Bashar al-Assad, and that is why indirectly supporting the visions or the policies of US and the West, and more specifically Israel. You have mentioned that by joining that camp, it served Turkey no purpose, as per your point of view. And you have also laid out a contradiction that how can Turkey be anti-Israel and anti-Iran at the same time, because it does not fit into the calculus, because both Iran and Israel are basically the adversaries of each other. But you have also mentioned that there is a ray of hope that Iran and Turkey might join hands when it comes to the Kurdish statehood or the issue of Kurdistan. So it would make Turkey and Iran a natural ally. And you have also compared the Turkish foreign policy towards the Ukrainian war as a much more nuanced and pragmatic approach as compared to the Middle Eastern approach, because there in Ukraine, Turkey has been acting as a sort of a mediator or a balancer between Ukraine and Russia, as well as US and Russia. With that, we will move on to our second speaker, Dr. Merve Suna. She is the associate professor and the vice chair of international relations department at Kirikkale University, Turkey. A double major graduate in international relations and history from Gazi University in 2011. She completed her PhD in international relations in 2019 and serving as associate professor since 2023. She also received advanced methodological training in St. Petersburg related to social sciences and his doctoral research. She is currently pursuing a second PhD in political science and social sciences at Gazi University. Dr. Ozel Oskan is the author of Empires, Great Parts from Past to Present, and editor of works such as Post Cold War System, State, and History. And apart from her academic activities, she is also the prominent commentator in the media, appearing both in the Turkish news channels as well as international news channels. Dr. Murph, over to you, and we would like to know about the Turkish perspective regarding the entire situation of the Middle East, specifically Syria, Gaza, and its competition with Iran and Israel. What are your takes on this issue? If you could kindly unmute yourself, Dr. Murph.
I'm so sorry. First, I'm so
Thank you.
happy and grateful to be here today to discuss these critical matters. And also, thanks to everyone who made this gathering possible. So, I'm building on a framework outlined by Professor Ünal, so I can proceed to analyze this process from the actor-based perspective. First of all, we all know that the chaotic nature of Syrian civil war, persistent for over a decade, has been further complicated by the interventions of regional and global actors. So the conflictions, interest of Israel, Iran, and Turkey in Syria have become particularly pronounced in recent years, marked by intensified military operation and escalating diplomatic tensions. So Israel military operation in Syria significantly intensified during 2024 and 2025. High trailing regional tension. So while Israel claims that this strike aims to curb Iran's influence in Syria and prevent strategic weapons from failing into hands to extremist group, this appears to be border agenda rooted into ideologically of promising lands and territorial expansion. Actually, since 1948, Israel has pursued an expansionist policy across the Middle East under this strategic vision. So, inevitably bringing it into conflict with Iran. And the origin of the Israel and Iran conflict can be tracked back to the 1979 Iran Islamic Revolution. And after the revolution, Iran began to referring Israel as the Zionist regime, and Israel similarly viewed Iran as a primary adversary in the region. And at this point, Iran has advanced its interest by supporting proxy forces against Israel, while Israel thought its Octopus Doctrine has aimed to strike Iran and assess and proxies across the region. So this strategy has further entangled the already complex regional dynamics. So we have to admit that. And also at the heart of this developments in Syria, Israel has conducted numerous, actually many times, airstrikes over the years to prevent Iran from establishing a permanent military presence in there. Israel justify or try to justify, we can say that, its action by claiming to intercept arms shipment to Hezbollah and the other Iranian-backed groups. One of the most notable incidents, maybe you can remember, in 2024 when Israel targeted the Iranian consulate in Damascus. an attack that drew strong international or regional commendation, because at this time we started to see a missile war in that time. Also, Iran described the assault as a violation of diplomatic immunity and threatened retaliation. Although a direct military confrontation was avoided, but this incident marked a significant escalation. Actually, particularly around December 8 in 2024. This is a very crucial time for global policy or for regional policy. I don't know how can I describe, but all of us see what's going on in Gaza right now. By the way, Iran had supported the Assad regime, as also in Syria expand its regional influence. However, the fall of Assad in 2024 December and the rise of Ahmed al-Shara regime, which backed by Turkiye, and several disrupted Iran and Israel strategic plans in Syria. So Turkey monitoring the developments closely in this region and Syria, and try to shape its policies based on its national security priorities. With the establishment of Turkey-supported government in Syria, Ankara has expanded its influence. So, nonetheless, Israel continued airstrike pose a threat not only Turkey's interest, but also the border regional stability. We have to understand that, because Israel tried to stop Syrian new stability policy, I guess, or I believe that. And also Turkey recognizing the crucial or importance of the stable and the unified Syria, because it remains committed to promoting security in region. And also since Assad's fall in December 24, Israel also carried out over 700 attacks on Syrian territory and targeting military facilities, weapon deposits, airports, and etc. Although Israel has tried to justify this operation by setting the neutral Iran military target, but also they try to prevent arms from reaching groups. And HTS recent development indicated that Turkey has also become a target, actually. Why I'm telling that? Because this was notably highlighted in the Nagel Commission report, which explicitly mentioned Turkey and describing is a potential regional threat for Israel. So since then, actually, Israel policy seems to have evolved in this direction, with Turkey and Israel increasingly facing off over the Syrian issue. And also, we have to add some important points there. The turning point, however, was October 8, 2023 with Gaza. Then Israel attacked on civilian in Gaza let Turkey to clearly solidify its stance against Israel. Turkey has since taken a firm position, even participating in ongoing proceeding at the International Court of Justice against Israel, because this is too important for us and also for Palestine history, I guess. Thus, the current situation is not merely territorial or regional, but also we have to understand that it's deeply ideological and theological. For Iran and Israel, the struggle of framing within a concept like She Crescent and Promised Land, respectively, I guess, they try to make their position in these ideas, ideological or theological. It's not a matter for us. But in concert, Turkey advocates for lasting peace and stability. So we have to highlight this. And supporting the new administration in Syria aligns with Turkey border goals. Also, Professor Inal highlighted this issue. And as you know, Turkey shared 911 kilometers long border with Syria, and securing this frontier is a vital for us. But also, it's not only for the protect it's our national interest, but also to counter terrorist threats emanating from the region. Therefore, Turkey's Syria policy is essential for addressing the regional terrorism problem. In concert, Israel under Netanyahu leadership or government, it appears to following strategically based on divide and rule or weaken and control policy, contributing to further regional instability rather than fostering peace. And under agreements with Syria or negotiation with Syria, new interim government, Turkey is planning to establish military bases in Syria. And after this policy or after this news, among the key location is strategically important T4 or TIAS Airbus near Homs, where Ankara intends to deploy Hisar class air defense system and unnamed aerial vehicles. Plans are also highway to set up similar bases in Apollo and Palmyra region. But we have to read this issue. The primary objective of these bases are twofold: to combat terrorist organizations such as ISIS, PKK, and etc., and to contribute to stabilization and reconstruction of Syria. So Israel, however, perceive that Turkey's military bases or military expansion in Syria are directly threat its national security. And after that, Israel officials have labeled Turkey's planned base in Palmyra a red line. In this response, the Israel Air Force has conducted air strikes targeting the T4 or Tiaz Air Base and Palmyra. So, as tension escalated, Turkey and Israel initiated technical level negotiation to prevent any unintended military confrontation in Syria, and this discussion held in Azerbaijan aimed to establish the confliction mechanism. But as you know that Turkey is a NATO member, and a direct confrontation with Israel would have significant consequences. However, will it ever reach at this point? I don't know. But as it know, Netanyahu recently complained about Turkey to Trump, but it ultimately led to no result. So this is very crucial, I guess, because we are seeing very important developments right now. And also we have to underline Turkey's policy, because Turkey wants to stabilization, and of course we want to make some stability in this region. Yeah, actually Turkey views the promotion of stability and peace, not just a regional necessity, but as a global imperative, I guess. So this is my speech. I'm so happy to be here. And again, if there are questions, so we can go on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Merv. So basically, your speech revolved around the Turkish vision that was regional stability. You have mentioned that unlike the regional ambitions of Israel, labeled as its acquisition of promised land, as well as the Iranian aspiration of creating a Shia crescent. Turkey has no such goals, but Turkey only believed in the regional stability. And you have also mentioned that because of the military operation of Israel and the escalating diplomatic tensions, we have come to this situation where there is a trioca between Israel, Turkey, and Iran, and everyone is fighting everyone. To be sure, there is a competition between Turkey and Iran. There is a military confrontation between Iran and Israel, and through the theater of Syria, we have seeing the increasing tensions between Turkey and Israel as well. So there is a trioca, and you have mentioned that it was in the Israeli vision since 1948 to expand its territorial boundaries that brought it in confrontation with Iran, and till 1979 it had considered Iran the main adversary in the region, and likewise Iran has also labeled Israel as a Zionist entity. You have also mentioned that Israel aims to prevent the arrival of stability in Syria that would affect the neighboring countries, while Turkey has the quite opposite view. Turkey believes in the stability of Syria, so it would be beneficial not only for the Syrian domestic politics but also for the neighboring region as well. And you have also mentioned by referring to a report that Israel views Turkey as a major regional threat, and that is why it is conducting airstrikes in Syria, and that is also a signal towards Turkey to not ensure its military presence inside Syria. So, in a way, it is also a direct threat to Turkish interest in Syria as well. So, with that, we would now move on to the question and answer session. My first question is directed to Dr. Hassan. Dr. Hassan, you have in a quite elaborative manner, you have mentioned the contradictions in Turkish foreign policy. But how do you see that, how to overcome those contradictions that would bring both Turkey and Iran closer to each other, because both are regional parts and both have their respective ambitions and both have quite a lot of respect in the Muslim community and in the Muslim world, specifically with regards to their opposition to Israeli aggression inside Gaza. So, how do you see that Turkey and Iran can come closer to each other by overcoming the tensions that have been arisen due to the situation in Syria? Can you unmute yourself, Dr. Hassan, please?
Well, in normal circumstances, what you would expect that would happen would be like Turkey and Iran closely cooperating, particularly in trade, economy, as well as in a variety of matters and ways, ranging from various logistics to other economic matters and what have you. This is in normal circumstances, but these days we don't have the normal circumstances. Well, I would also add something to normal circumstances approach, that is, in the emerging multipolar world order, you would have certainly superpowers like China, for instance, and China's emergence as a superpower in its, in such a way as it did over the last 40 years or so. And today, China stands on its feet so firmly in every respect: economy, trade, military, and in any way you can think of. And then you have other superpowers like the United States. Russia is another superpower, particularly in military matters, but there are also prospective superpowers. Whether they would actually become a superpower or not depends on a number of issues that would develop gradually. Now, for the first time in political history of the world of the last 500 years or so, you have quite a number of, quite a long list of regional powers like Turkey and Iran, Pakistan, quite a number of them. For instance, I don't think that the European Union would actually sustain all the pressures coming from the multipolar world order. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if the European Union were to crumble in the years ahead or turn into a chattering club, very much like NATO, because these institutions and integration processes and the military alliance represent the Cold War and the unipolar world order. So what I'm saying is Iran and Turkey are already medium-sized powers with enormous potential to project power in their surroundings. For instance, if Turkey were to take the side of one superpower or the other in its own region, it would have the potential to tilt the balance of power to that or the other superpower. And this is happening for the first time in the world in the sense that we didn't have so many states over the last, for instance, 100 years ago, there were not so many independent states, and you can actually break them down into superpowers and medium powers or regional powers and small powers and blah, blah. Now, ideally speaking, Turkey and Iran should be good friends and neighbors and cooperate on a variety of issues involving not only economy and economics, and also political matters like regional issues. For instance, they could basically collaborate on the Kurdistan project by the United States and Israel indirectly. Instead of basically confronting each other over matters like Syria, Iraq, and others, they should potentially cooperate. For instance, before this dirty war in Syria in 2011, there were no terroristic attacks between Syria and Turkey. There was nobody crossing that border between the two countries. And there was no PYD, PKK in Syria. There was no Al-Qaeda or ISIL or Al-Nusra or whatever, or any of that. There was none of them. What I'm saying is that in terms of regional politics, the two countries should cooperate closely, but also they should also bring in their cooperation, like countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, in order to how shall I say, promote stability across the region. But there are obvious problems. You can imagine, for instance, when Iran gets a bit too powerful, then Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf Arab countries get concerned about rising power of Iran and vice versa, presumably. So these are all the problems, and we need confidence building in the region. When the United States and Israel basically mess up with the region, the upshot is normally chaos, turmoil, and bloodshed, all the, letting blood and, how shall I say, tears and what have you, complete destruction of working societies like Iraq, Syria, and others. Look at Libya, for instance. The way they messed up with a country, with a stable country like Libya, which had the largest GDP per head, in the whole of Africa is now in absolute turmoil. You can't bring about any degree of stability in the country at all. So once you have the United States and Israel acting together in one way or the other with political Islamist groups, the Salafis and the others across the Middle East, this doesn't actually augur well in terms of stability and peace and in good relations across the country, across the region between countries. This is what I would say. But if you go into the nitty-gritty details of Turkey-Iranian relations, and if you bring in, we have now the current incumbent government takes a completely different view of Syria, where it basically its approach to both Iran and Israel are equally, how shall I say, adversarial. And then both countries opposed to Turkey in Syria. Whether Iran has any influence left in Syria remains to be seen, by the way. But the negative attitude of Iran resulting in the overthrow of Assad regime through this HTS groups backed up by Turkey and others remains as a scar in Turkish-Iranian relations. But what I'm saying is, when you have a situation of this sort and then you get into the nitty-gritty details and then you pick up a fight with this country over this, with another country over that, I don't think this is foreign policy. But this is what we have, in the entire region these days, but particularly in Syria, involving Turkey, Israel, and Iran. By the way, Israel has a clear-cut policy. It has and it's been like that. It knows what to do and what not to do. But when it comes to other countries, particularly over the last 10 years or so, or even more, with regard to Turkey, for instance, during the course of the Syria war, Turkey was basically on the worst possible terms with not only Syria but Israel at the same time, and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Gulf Arab countries, or quite a number of them, and at the same time with Russia, because it basically brought down a Russian fighter jet over its dispute again with Russia over Syria. So these are the sort of contradictions in Turkish policy over Syria in particular and to the Middle East in general. And we have all these contradictions lingering on.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan, for quite an explanatory remarks. Dr. Murph, let me come to you. You have mentioned that both Israel and Iran, they have their ideological visions that is not compatible with the regional stability prospects. But there is also a criticism on Turkey that it basically follows the new Ottoman vision, which is also another ideological vision. And somehow the collapse of Bashar al-Assad has indirectly benefited Israel to strengthen itself in the region. So how do you view all these contradictions, and how do you see and how do you justify this Turkish vision vis-a-vis Israeli and Iranian vision, as well as Turkish position vis-a-vis Syria and the strengthened Israeli position because of this whole Syrian mess?
Okay, I'm so sorry. Actually, we have to understand that Turkey has a foreign policy, but not an Ottoman type, I guess, because we are not living in the imperial age. So we have to try our foreign policy very, very crucial position. At this point, yes, Turkey has a potential regional power, as Professor Ünal said, but also Turkey growing influence in Middle East and Balkans or maybe Africa. So we have to understand that we have no Ottoman Empire ideology or Ottoman Empire foreign policy. We have our own foreign policy because now we live in a new era and there are new actors in system, and we have to read these catastrophic developments and positions in every place or every field in global policy. And at this point, if we think about Turkey's policy, also we have to underline there are great power or super power, what you want to call them. We have to understand that. And also, 100 years ago, there were not so many independent states in this region. And of course, we can talk about maybe Ottoman Empire and Ottoman policy. But right now, there are many actors also, and Turkey and Iran should try to make new policies in this region because there is a Israel factor and they want to try to make unstable region policy. So I don't know what can I say about it, but I was talking about ideologically and theologically for Iran and Israel policies, not Turkish policy, because we try to make some stability in this place, and we try to cooperate new field, and we try to make all controversial actors together in this region.
And Dr. Mab, the second part of the question that how would you counter this argument that the collapse of Bashar al-Assad in Syria has actually strengthened the Israeli position, not only in Syria but also in Gaza and Lebanon, because Bashar al-Assad was considered as sort of a figure that would counter somehow who would counter the Israeli aggression and would support the Palestinian groups and Lebanese groups against their conflict with Israel. So both of these groups were left in abeyance. So how would you counter that?
Are you asking me?
Well, I was asking Dr. Merv, but I think she has disconnected. Let me direct the same question to you, Dr. Hassan. How would you see this?
Well, there is no other way to see it other than to say that what Turkey did in Syria overall, from the beginning of this dirty war, its involvement right up to the overthrow of the Bashar al-Assad regime, was a huge gift to Israel, offered to Tel Aviv on a golden plate. Basically, what Tel Aviv gained out of the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad regime, or the Ba'ath regime in general, although the Ba'ath regime tried to basically reform itself within the strict counters of the regime under Bashar al-Assad, but overall, let's call it Ba'ath regime. And the basically collapse of that regime offered Israel all the opportunity to break the direct logistics of Iran into Hezbollah, Lebanon, even perhaps to some extent Hamas and what have you. And after all, if you look at the if you shortly look at the history of the Iranian-Syrian relations from the Iran-Iraq war onwards, Syria certainly closely cooperated with Iran in the Iran-Iraq war. That is when the Syrian regime began to estrange its the Arab neighbors in the region, because the others, under the leadership of the Saudis in particular, presented that war as a war between the Arabs and the Iranians, but the Syrians obviously had a different view, which was perhaps more logical in terms of what unfolded in the years ahead. So what I would say is that Israel or Syria basically countered Israeli aggression, Israeli expansion, and Israel in general from its establishment onwards in 1948. In every Arab-Israeli war, you have Syria taking part, either successfully or unsuccessfully, but you have Syria all the time. In the last being in 1973, in the first few days or up to a week, both Egypt and Syria were quite successful in pushing Israel out of the occupied territories. What I'm saying, Iran-Syria axis, if you like, created all sorts of headaches for Israel through Hezbollah and what have you. And basically, what Turkey did in the end, or what Turkey contributed to in the end, was certainly played into the hands of Israel. Israel has been extremely happy that Syria collapsed. And it is also, it wants to see a collapsed Syria to go on, without a centrally governed Syria that could sort of hold its own against Israel at one stage or the other. But the circumstances are such that Israel is presumably going to, in the end, succeed in a divided, partitioned Syria of some sort, or perhaps under a federation of some sort, without legally establishing a federation or not, but along ethnic lines, along sectarian lines, along even religious lines. So all the Arabs, for instance, whether or not they were Alawites, Shiite, Druzi, Christian, or what have you, could be accommodated under the previous regime because they were all Arabs under a secular regime. But now they are being pitted against each other. And, what is come out of all that, what is going to come out of all that mess is anybody's guess.
So, Dr. Hassan, is there any chance of the balkanization of Syria? We see there are smaller states led by Alawites, led by Kurds, led by Arabs, led by Shiite minority or Druze. So, do you see that? Is there any possibility, or could be any possibility in the future if the fighting persists?
You don't have to wait for the future to come round. It is already there, I think. It is the balkanization of Syria is there. You have, for instance, the PKK, PYD-led groups pushing their agenda to the northeast of the Euphrates. And then you have the continual Alawite massacres in the hands of the Salafi HTS led groups. And then you have all those senseless non-Syrian groups like Uyghurs and Uzbeks and all of the people, nobody knows how they ended up in that part of Syria. And they are now partly in the government, partly in the Syrian military or what have you. And then you have, in addition to the Alawites, over the last few days, the Sunnis, the extremist Sunni groups, basically promoting a pogrom of the Durzis. And the Druze groups are already under Israeli control, or a large part of them. The southern Druze region has been under Israeli occupation since 1967. So the Druze leadership made it quite clear that if things were to go on like that, they would seek Israeli protection. And what is going to be left in the end is the Sunnis. But then you have the secular Sunnis as opposed to the radical Islamist Sunnis. What sort of a government would come out of all this mess? Would you imagine? It is, it is certainly anybody's guess. So I'd say, I mean, it is already a process of fragmentation, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassan. My last question to you, Dr. Murph. As Dr. Hassan has pointed out that just a couple of years ago, Turkey has been in confrontation with nearly all of the neighboring states and beyond. It was not in good terms with the US over the S-400 deal with Russia. It was also having an sort of a confrontation with Russia because of the conflict over Ukraine and Syria. And Turkey has been in diplomatic tension with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, Iraq. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, now Turkey has become the epicenter of the regional proceeding. It has influence in Syria, it has influence in northern Iraq, it has good ties with Moscow, it has good ties with the US. It has conducted rapprochement with Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and somehow working relations with Iran as well. So when there comes a power, there comes a responsibility as well. So how do you foresee Turkish position in this new Middle East, where the dynamics have changed? Non-state actors are on the sideline, terrorism is on the surge, and Israel is being quite aggressive. How would you foresee the Turkish response to all this situation in the Middle East?
Okay. First of all, I want to add something. Like Professor Ünal stated that there are concerns in Syria could be balkanized, yes, meaning divided into small parts. And actually, I believe that Turkey has clearly red lines regarding to this issue. The same applies to major actors in the region, I guess, try to influence. For example, Israel actually try to do this because Syria is a place that very open sectarian and ethnic conflicts, and Israel also sees this situation and try to use it, and that is one of the reasons why Israel active in Golan Heights actually. So if you come to your question, I believe that Turkey's foreign policy actually no desire to conflict. But maybe sometimes, and our foreign policy change some emotional points. I don't know, but I believe that Turkey try to follow active neutrality, like in Russia-Ukraine war, because in this situation or in this process, we try to defend international law, and also we try to do some make good relations with our neighbors, as you indicated that Egypt, and Egypt actually is very another story for us, I guess, because we try to build or making our good relations again, but also we sometimes in our foreign policy we are becoming very emotional, I guess, so we have to highlight that. But I don't think that in our foreign policy we are not a Ottomanism or something like that. We just try to step for stability and peace. and this is very important for our national interest and also, I guess, regional interest, because as we can see in Syria, and there are lots of actors, and maybe we can talk about Iran and Israel today, but actually we don't forget Russia, because Russia is adjusting its position based on this reality in the region. And so I believe that we will try to stability, but if some actor or one actor try to cross our red lines, and Turkey try to answer not diplomatically, but maybe we can use some other options. I don't know, but I don't think that Turkey tried to do some military conflict in region, but maybe some sanctions. I don't know. So I can say that we try to step for stability, but every country has red lines and every country has national interest, and it shaped their foreign policy.
Dr. Hassan, Dr. Merve, thank you so much for sparing the time today and joining our online event. It was indeed a pleasure to have both of you. For me, at least, it was quite an enriching discussion, and I am sure our audience got enriched and benefited from this discussion as well. I thank you on the behalf of our president, Ambassador Johar Salim, my colleagues here at IRS, and myself. Thank you so much, and hopefully in the future as well, we will continue to have you as a speaker for our eminent speakers or for our online or physical events. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Firas. It was my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Take care.